Very good afternoon and welcome to the next edition of our webinar series here at Murdoch University, Dubai. Great to see some familiar names on the attendee list there, so welcome back. For those that are new to the webinar series, my name is Brad and I work in the marketing team at Murdoch University, and today, very lucky to be joined by one of my academic colleagues, John, who I'll be handing over to in just one moment to commence the webinar, which today will be all about active reading and specifically how to kind of engage with your kind of university reading. So a very key skill that you will have, especially if you're currently in high school and getting ready to make that next step into higher education. We do want this to be an interactive session as always, so please do engage with us in the with the chat box function. Let us know where you're joining from today and perhaps what current study level you are at, whether you're in high school or a mature student. And perhaps you can share with us, some of the things that you've been doing during this kind of very uncertain time. Perhaps if you're in lockdown, we're always interested to hear what different things our students are up to kind of keep themselves busy and almost keep themselves sane at the moment. If you're having any kind of technical issues, again, just let me know. I'll be here throughout, so I'll be able to hopefully address any problems that you are having. And at the end of the session, I'll come back and just give you each a bit more of a general overview about Murdoch University and specifically the types of programs that we are offering to students. Hopefully you'll find today's session very useful so that you'll be interested to come back and experience more. So we'll be able to provide some information about future webinars as well. We will be sharing the webinar and the recording at the end of today's session, so you can refer back and kind of use the website links that John will be providing, so you don't have to worry about scribbling everything down right now. But yeah, without further ado, I think I will just hand over to John now to get started. I hope you enjoy the session, and I'll join you again at the end. So yeah, John, over to you.
Thanks, Brad, and just want to join Brad in welcoming everyone. My name is John Welkener. I'm the academic English teacher here at Murdoch University, and I am super pleased and excited to be presenting to you today on the topic of active reading. Without further ado, here's our outline. These are our objectives that we're aiming to hit. First thing we're going to do is we're going to define what is active reading. All right, so certainly very important to know exactly what it is that we're talking about. And then we're going to get into applications. So not only what is active reading, but what are some strategies that we can use to read actively. And after that, I'm going to give you my 3 top active reading tips. We're going to look at 3 digital hacks for active online reading. As you know, in the world we live in, especially a post-COVID-19 world, everybody's online now. And so we're learning how to use the internet more effectively for reading. And then at the end, we're going to have a quizzes. All right, this is a fun interactive activity. If you were here in the previous webinar, you participated in that and hopefully had fun with that. And then at the end, we'll have a chance for questions and opportunities that we'll discuss with you. I do ask, so if there's anything that's super confusing or anything that you want to know more about as you're listening to the presentation, if you could just make a note of that question, you could just write it down and then save it for the end. Hopefully we'll answer your question during the presentation, but if not, then we can address it towards the end. So I'll move somewhat quickly, but hopefully not too fast that you won't be able to understand. But I really hope that this presentation is useful to you and helpful to you in not just in reading, but in whatever activity, whatever pursuit, professional pursuit that you are pursuing. So, what is active reading? So according to the Open University, they've given us a nice little definition here. They say, active reading simply means reading something with a determination to understand and evaluate it for its relevance to your needs. Now let's not just gloss over that, right? This is an active reading webinar, so let's read actively, okay? So first thing is, here's the question we're asking. What is active reading? And here they're saying that reading something, it's not just reading something, but reading something with determination, all right? So determination means that you've decided, that you've determined in advance that you want to not just read it, but understand it and evaluate it for its relevance to your needs. Okay, so even if I'm reading this actively, I might be thinking to myself, okay, what does this mean? Okay, it's reading for understanding, but not just reading for understanding, and not just reading for evaluating, but most importantly, we're trying to figure out how can we understand it and evaluate it so that, okay, we can understand how it's relevant to our needs. Okay, so, and this has a very general application, right? Everyone has a different job, everyone has a different gifting, everyone has a different direction that they're going in. But as we read, we can find ways to kind of hold on to the different ideas that we're reading and put it together in a way that's useful to whatever task that we are pursuing. Okay, so those are kind of three aspects of active reading. We're reading, first of all, with an intention to understand. We're reading with an intention to evaluate. And finally, we're reading with an intention to find its relevance to our needs. Okay, it looks like I need to see if I can remove those annotations there. So what I want to do now is we're going to look at three different ways to read actively. Right? So how exactly do we go about doing this? Now, these are three different strategies, but as we go along, I think, I hope you'll see that they go in hand. You know, there's different ways of going about it, and you may kind of pick and choose. You may say, I like strategy number 1 better than strategy number 2, or strategy number 2 better than strategy number 3. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you come away from this presentation with a sense of, a better sense of how to go about attacking and understanding the text that you're reading. All right, so strategy number 1. Strategy number 1 is take careful notes. Okay, so how do we take careful notes? In high school, I had a teacher who was always encouraging her students to annotate. Right, she was super passionate about Shakespeare. She was super passionate about all these books that we were reading, Scarlet Letter, all of these interesting books that we're reading. And she claimed that anytime she was reading a book, even if it was just for enjoyment, that she would always be taking notes in the margins. So how do we do that? My first tip for you here is put down the highlighter and pick up the pen. Put down the highlighter, pick up the pen. So what does this mean? I think a lot of times teachers will encourage you to highlight things, all right? So I'm not saying it's bad to highlight things, but if we're reading actively, we really don't want to zone out, right? How easy is it when we're in those college courses or we're reading that textbook and just kind of gloss our eyes over the text, maybe even color code it a little bit, but we're not really engaging with the material in front of us. So one way that we can kind of get past that kind of passive reading is to put down the highlighter and pick up the pen and start actually making notes. Okay, and what kind of notes do we make? Well, you know, if you're ever frozen, you're like, I'm not sure what to write. One thing you can do is you can turn the title into a question. Turn the title into a question. So let's say the title of the book is The Oldest Creature. Well, the most obvious question that we could turn that into is, what is the oldest creature? Right? So what is kind of the first question that might come into our mind? What is it, right? And then if you want to go further into questions, you can ask the other, what we call the 5 WH questions. So not just who, but it's who, what, when, where, why, and how. Right? Who, what, when, where, why, and how. All right, so you could ask, what is the oldest creature? Why is it the oldest creature? Things like that. And then, of course, as you inevitably will find in text, there'll be words that you don't know. And so what I would encourage you to do is circle any words that you don't know. If you have access to a dictionary or to Google, just look them up as you go along. Or if you don't have access to a dictionary, just write them down and then you can look them up later. So this video is actually going to walk us through this strategy number 1, which is annotation or taking careful notes.
Hi, my name is Gail Shirey. I'm an
Okay, so let me make sure that I'm sharing my screen here.
Western Michigan College, and today we're going to talk about annotating. One of the purposes of annotating is to help engage your mind with the text and focus your attention on what you're reading. So the steps for annotating, the first one is to turn any heading or title into a question.
Okay, last time I believe the volume was not loud enough. Is it loud enough this time? Because if not, what I can do is...
Yeah, that's fine, John.
It's fine. Okay, is it working?
Great.
And you can see it just fine.
Yes, we can.
In this particular passage, it's the oldest creature. We're going to turn that into a question. And the purpose of the question is to answer it through the text. So my first question is, what is the oldest creature? And then my second thing I would want to know is maybe why. Why is it the oldest? So then, to help engage in the text, the first thing you want to do with each paragraph is find the topic and underline it. So as I read along in this particular paragraph, it talks about, okay, what wild animal is the oldest in this continent? And so that's my topic. And it goes along to answer that question in the paragraph. And then the next step is to also circle any cue or keywords that might be important that I know or help me with information. So as I'm reading along, a keyword is marsupial, but also 70, because 70 million years might be a significant number. And so then what I want to do is pull out the key information over on the side, and I want to actually write directly in the text with annotating. I'm not taking notes on another piece of paper, you're writing directly on it. So my first one is oldest, and we know what the oldest is. It tells us in the article, it says the Virginia gray possum. And then a couple of important things I might need to know about it. It is a marsupial, and it has survived for 70 million years. In the next paragraph, as I move along, again, I look for the topic, which is why the possum survived, and I'm going to underline that. And now here's some keywords. A keyword is numerous. Numerous means there are many. And so as I'm reading along, I want to maybe number them and point them out as I'm reading. So the first one is birth rate. And as I'm reading along, another one is it has the most teeth. As I'm reading along, I find out that it's and it's also a food. So when I pull out my information, I'm going to say, okay, why survive? And then I'm going to list my reasons. What is growth like? And I know that I'll give myself a little bit of a hint here on why the records important. They grow twice a year, last 13 years. And then the second reason it has the most teeth. Again, I may want to give myself a little more information. Okay, they had 50 teeth, and they eat anything. And I might say insects, berries, whatever they eat. And then the third reason is they run quickly. The fourth is that they climb well. And the fifth is they are a good swimmer. You'll do this for each paragraph, keeping the information next to the paragraph it's about. When you're finished, you'll have a very similar looking annotation as this. As you can see, this article has been completely finished. The topics have been underlined, key points have been numbered, and information's been pulled out to the side in an organized manner.
Excellent. So what we just saw there is an example of those 5 points or 4 points that I just made, things that you can do to annotate. So let's say strategy number one, maybe we didn't quite get all of that. Let's look at strategy number two, and maybe it'll help us kind of outline the best way to read a text and to read it actively. So this is strategy number two, what we call the SQ3R method. SQ3R method. And this is simply an acronym for active reading. And the S stands for skim. So the first thing you're going to do is to skim the text. Second, you're going to Q, question. So you ask questions about the text. R, you read the text. Very important. The next is you recite. You recite or you review the information. After you recite it, so you repeat it, and then after you repeat it, then you review it. So you go back over it to see what's useful in it. For, let's say, you can use this when you're studying for a test, or if you're just studying to write a paper or things like that. So this video is going to go over in detail these 5 steps for us.
3R is a great reading and note-taking strategy. Why do you need a reading strategy? Well, how many times have you picked up a textbook, read for a while, and realized that you've not remembered anything you just read? Using the SQ3R method helps you remember what you read so you can get wonderful grades and do well in all your classes that test you about information that you've read. You should use this method for any textbook reading and for any online or print articles that you read or use for research in any of your classes. The S is for skim. Before you curl up with a blankie and hot cocoa to read, take a moment to skim over the entire text. Skim means to look something over at a bird's eye view. Look at main headings, bolded words, and any pictures or diagrams. This will give you an idea of what the article will be about. This also helps you know what to expect and hopefully will trigger some background information you might already know about the topic. The next step is to ask questions. Asking questions helps you pay attention better to even the most boring reading assignment, because you are essentially on a mission to answer the questions you have asked yourself. If we have a purpose, we are more purposeful. You should write down any questions you have and turn headings into questions that you must answer by reading. The first R in the 3 R's is to read. You are now going to answer the list of questions you've created by actually reading the text. The next R is to recite. In this case, it is not only okay to talk to yourself, but actually encouraged. Take notes on paper as you read and say the answers to your questions out loud if not too many people are around. Put the answers to the questions you've answered or the important points you've discovered from the reading into your own words. When you put something into your own words, whether in writing or by talking to yourself, you're more likely to remember it later. The final R and the final step in the process is to review. Read through your notes, perhaps highlight or even take additional notes on your notes. Have you ever read through your notes later and realized you have no idea what you meant when you wrote them? Doing a quick review while the reading is fresh in your mind to add a few additional details will prevent that from happening. This is also a fantastic time to talk with someone else about what you've read. Bring it up with a classmate who also had to do the same reading, or bring it up at the dinner table. Your parents will be thrilled when you have something to share when they ask you, "What did you do at school today?" So that is the SQ3R reading method. The more you practice it, the better at it you will become, and the more you will remember when you read.
So that's one great method, right, called the SQ3R method. If you want to learn more about that, you can always just Google it, SQ3R method. And this is really one of the first videos that should pop up. It's not a magic formula, right? So it's not going to solve all your problems, but it's just a way of organizing our thoughts as we're reading so that we're less confused with the outcome. Okay, so we should be following something more or less like this, these 5 steps when we're reading actively. Okay, strategy number 3. This is critical, which means crucial, which means very important. Okay, so when I say using critical thinking skills, all right, this is something that's absolutely important that we can't overlook when we're working in any kind of academic environment, whether that's undergraduate, whether that's graduate or postgraduate studies, any kind of academic studies, we have to use critical thinking. And this is, by the way, this is a skill that everybody is learning, everybody's growing in. So first of all, what is critical thinking skills, all right? Some people have the idea that critical thinking means just looking down your nose at everything and just being negative about it. Okay, but that's not really critical thinking. What we mean by critical thinking is simply using your own powers, your own abilities of analysis and evaluation to make a decision about information that is presented to you, right? So actually when I was, I think, a freshman in university, and you know, there were some upperclassmen. I was in it was actually an ROTC organization, and they would boss me around and tell me, do this, do that, and I had to do it because I was what they called a fish. I was the lower on the ladder, so to speak. And sometimes they would tell me that I had to make an assessment, and then I would look at them like, why are you asking me to make an assessment? Because all along you've been just telling me to basically answer yes sir, no sir kind of thing. But now you're asking me to make an assessment. And that's exactly what critical thinking is. It's making an assessment, and not just making an assessment, but based off of our own powers of analysis and evaluation. So what critical thinking really does is it takes the, it puts the responsibility on ourselves to make a decision about information that's being presented to us. And that can be information from a presentation, it can be information from a video, or it can be information from a book or a text that we're reading, either digitally or physically. So here's just some of my tips on critical thinking skills that I've written down just for you. So one way to use critical thinking skills is to simply ask questions, right? And even as we discussed before, all right, you can ask questions about the title, you can ask questions about the content, but probably one of the best questions to ask to think critically is, what is the author's purpose? What is the author's purpose? Right, so specifically, what is the meaning that the author is intending to convey through the text? Right? Because the fact is, every author, they're not writing in a vacuum, right? They're writing for a reason. And sometimes the reason that we're coming to them with to read their text is not the same reason that they're writing from. So this is my pro tip for you, really, is don't assume that you know how the author thinks, right? As a reader, it's your job to learn how the author thinks, right? So don't assume that the way you think is the same way that the author thinks. You have to learn how the other person thinks. And specifically, if they're the one writing, it's our job to learn how they think. And if we learn how they think, then we can learn how to answer their questions and pass their tests, right? So we can get those points and pass those classes and get those degrees and certifications that we really want. So that's the first tip, is ask questions, right? Ask those intelligent questions about the author and what is their purpose? What is their reason for writing? Tip number 2 is infer based on context. And when I was a high school teacher, I said this every day: infer, infer, infer. All right, so what does infer mean? All right, what is inference? Okay, inference very basically means to reason based on evidence. I just clicked the wrong button there on my presentation. Okay, reason based on evidence. All right, so if you're taking notes here, you can say inference is reasoning based on evidence. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, so you're reasoning, you're using your higher level thinking skills to make a decision based off of the evidence, which is usually coming from the context, right? What is the context? The context is the surroundings. It's usually the time and the place and other elements that are surrounding the text, okay? So that's a very general statement. What do I mean by that? So one thing I mean by that is don't jump to conclusions, right? How often do students pick the most obvious answer for a question when if they thought about it just a little bit longer or considered all of the options, maybe they would have gotten the correct answer on the test. So I'd say don't jump to conclusions, all right? Inference is really about being careful, and it's about considering carefully and being patient before we make a decision. Okay, and one kind of, let's say, mind hack that I would give you to do this well is start with looking at the big picture first, and then the smaller picture. If you remember in the video, the analogy the author used about the bird, looking at something from a bird's eye view. So you want to look at the big picture, consider the whole scenario before you start looking at the small details. You want to get to the small details, but first you want to look at the bigger picture. All right, that's the bird's eye view that we're thinking of. Or another analogy is, I don't know how many of you enjoy photography or like taking pictures with your camera. All right, I don't have a super nice camera, but I have my smartphone. And my smartphone has this little zoom feature, a digital zoom feature, right? So let's say I'm taking a picture of something really far away, right? When I first open my camera, I'm looking at the big picture. I'm looking at something far away, right? Let's say I'm looking at a bird that's flying in the distance. But if I want to see it up close, right, then I have to zoom in on it, right? And that's kind of what inference is doing. We're looking first at the context. We're looking at the evidence, the bigger picture. And then once we spot the small thing that we want to see, we're zooming in on it and looking at the smaller picture, right? And so when we consider that bigger picture, when we consider the surroundings and then look at the smaller piece of evidence, right, then we're able to make a more informed decision. Right. So that's my advice, is consider multiple perspectives before making your decision. Okay, and let's just say, how many of you have ever been on a test and it was a multiple choice test and you had 4 options, A, B, C, or D, all right? And let's say that you've used your powers of reasoning to eliminate 2 of the options and there's 2 left, all right? So let's say you have a question, let's just say, you know, the question is, you know, you saw a tree that fell down in the forest and you have 2 options. One option is that the wind blew over the tree, and the other option is that a meteorite from Mars came and knocked over the tree. Which one would you choose? And this may sound like a seemingly silly scenario, but what I would advise you is to choose the simplest option in that case, right? So if you eliminated all of the non-variables and you've got only 2 variables left, then we would use what is called Occam's razor, all right? This is essentially stated as the best solution is often the simplest one. Not always the simplest one, but often the best solution is the simplest one. So if you're uncertain about what something may mean, consider the best solution to be the simplest one. Another example I thought I can think of for Occam's razor is, so I was a teacher in Korea for 2 years. I taught English in Korea for 2 years. And I had a friend who had been teaching English in Korea for 5 years, right? And so he had a lot of wisdom about teaching that he could share with me that I didn't have because I was new there. And he mentioned a time where he was upset because of the cultural differences, right? He was American and they were Korean and they had so many cultural differences. And he couldn't understand why they were doing things one way and he was doing things another way. And he was just getting angry at them. And he told me that his friend, who was also a teacher in Korea, had given him this advice. He said, have you heard of Occam's razor? I said, no, I haven't. He said, what is Occam's razor in this situation? In this situation, he said, don't attribute or never attribute to malice that for which ignorance can sufficiently explain. I'll say that again. Never attribute to malice that for which ignorance can sufficiently explain. And in that case, my friend said after he heard that, his anger just went completely away. Not to say that it solved the problem that he was in, but it actually helped him to realize, okay, maybe these people aren't trying to screw over my plans, but maybe they're simply ignorant. They simply don't know. And in that case, that's the simplest solution, as opposed to imagining this scenario where this culture or these people are against you, kind of a thing. So I find that to be a healthy or not helpful use of Occam's razor. And we can also apply it, by the way, in active reading. All right. So, and it also applies in situations of logic as well. So you could say, all dogs have 4 legs and my cat has 4 legs. Therefore, my cat is a dog. Right? Well, obviously that's absurd, right? That's not the best solution because it's not the simplest one. You could argue your way out of that by simply pointing out that cats have 4 legs and dogs have 4 legs, but cats are not dogs, things like that. So that's just one example. Okay, so let's move on to how can we apply other critical thinking skills. So I've given some examples, but here is a diagram that you will see often in, let's say, educational circles. Right? So if you're ever studying to become a teacher or a tutor or want to be involved in education in any way, or in any applications of education as well, then this diagram will become in super handy. So this is Bloom's taxonomy of learning objectives. And we don't have time to look at all of the aspects of this, but you see these are kind of the higher level thinking skills that we're aiming for whenever we're reading a text. At the very basic bottom of the pyramid, so at the foundation, we have knowledge. All right, knowledge, what do we know? Okay, what do we know? What do we understand, right? And understanding is corresponds to comprehension, right? So what do we understand about what we're reading? If we go up on the ladder, one more step, we have application. How are we applying it in ways that are useful, right, to whatever we're doing? And at the very top of the pyramid, we have really those higher level skills, higher order critical thinking skills, which we call analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, right? And analysis is simply just analyzing something, right? Looking at the different components, looking at the different parts. And then synthesis is creating, right? So being creative. Maybe you've heard someone else create an argument and then you create an argument, a counter argument to that, all right? And then finally, evaluation, right? So maybe evaluating can involve, saying one thing is of greater merit than another, things like that, right? So maybe that sounds very dry and general to you, but if you're thinking about something that's important to you, maybe you have an iPhone and I have an Android, and we can talk for hours about why your iPhone is better than my Android or something like that. This would always involve higher level critical thinking skills. All right, and before we go on, if you want to, if you're taking notes and if you want to do some interactive online activities regarding critical thinking, then you can always go to, if you Google critical thinking RMIT, all right, RMIT University in Melbourne has a critical thinking and critical reading lab. And it's a free resource that they make available that if you Google that, critical thinking RMIT, it should be the first link that pops up. And it provides some exercises and activities in these critical thinking skills, right? So by the way, none of us are ever fully perfect in our critical thinking skills, but the more we practice with these things, the more effective we'll be in our active reading. So these are really crucial, they're really critical, they're really important towards our active reading. Okay, so hopefully I've been able to help to clarify 3 different strategies for active reading. Now I'm just going to give you my top 3 tips for active reading. So you say, John, what are your number 1 pieces of advice for me? Well, I'm glad you asked. So number 1 is read slowly. Read slowly. So the 20th century psychoanalyst Carl Jung is famous for saying, hurry is not of the devil. Hurry is the devil. All right. It's kind of this idea that when we go too fast, we make stupid decisions, right? How many of you drive, or how many of you have been driving or in a car with someone that's driving too fast and they made a wrong turn, right? Or they missed the exit, or they got pulled over, I remember when I first moved to the UAE, I like to drive fast. I like to drive just a little bit, just a little bit over the speed limit. But I quickly found out, especially in certain areas of town, if I drive too fast, then the camera will take a picture of my license plate and I'll have to pay a fine, right? And usually the cost of that fine was greater than whatever benefit that I was getting from driving too fast. So that's why my advice to you really from my heart is read slowly. Don't feel like you have to rush, all right? Just because you're skimming doesn't mean that you're reading fast. It means that you're looking at the big picture and then taking care with every step of the process. So James W. Sire, he wrote a great book called How to Read Slowly. And in that book, he says, good readers reread many things many times, right? And in that book, he says it doesn't really actually matter how fast you read. And I would say don't listen to all of those, those so-called gurus out there who are saying, oh, learn how to speed read, how to do this faster, faster, faster. Those people are generally invested in getting money from you and really kind of making money off of the impatience of modern society. But what I think you'll find, and I really believe this, is if you read patiently, all right, you'll reap a lot greater benefit from what you're reading. Okay, so the average reader can read 250 words a minute, but if you're faster than that, great. If you're slower than that, great. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you're reading slowly, that you're rereading it, and that you're evaluating it for its usefulness to you. Okay, so tip number 2, read for enjoyment. All right, so my advice is just simple. Yeah, read for enjoyment, and specifically follow your inspiration. Follow your inspiration. What inspires you? What challenges you? What encourages you? All right, and the simple fact is, in university, you will be reading some things that might not inspire you. They might not challenge you. That might not encourage you. Okay? Don't worry about that. You'll eventually find something in your studies if you read enough that will inspire you, that will challenge you, and that will encourage you in a productive pursuit. All right. And the reason I always encourage my students to follow their inspiration is simply because if something does not captivate your imagination, if it doesn't inspire you or challenge you or encourage you in some way, you'll eventually forget it. And I really believe that. So that's my advice is read for enjoyment. Okay. And tip number 3, and this one may be perhaps the hardest one to implement, but I encourage you to, if you're still listening and you're still around, then I just encourage you to just consider it for the long term, is develop a daily reading habit. All right? So how do we do that? How do we develop a daily reading habit? All right? Well, number 1 is choose a book that inspires you. Right? It could be any book. It could be fiction. It could be nonfiction. It could be a true story. It could be based on a true story, something like that. And read 1 chapter every day for 1 month. And after you finish that book, choose another book and repeat the process. But remember, okay, don't burn yourself out. We're not trying to overread. We're not trying to read too much. If the book really bores you, just drop it. Read something else. Right? And you want to balance heavy reading with light reading. Right? And this is something I've learned through experience. I'm always reading at least, I don't know, I probably have 3 or 4 books that I'm reading right now. But one of the best pieces of advice I've received is choose 1 old book and 1 new book, right? So 1 classic book could be an old book of Shakespeare. It could be a famous novel from whatever kind of novels you're aware of. Could be a religious book if you're a religious person. And then also, so choose 1 old book and then choose 1 new book, right? So something that's been published in the last, really say, 1 to 10 years. Right? Because this will help to keep you up to date with what's happening in the world around you, and also keep you in touch with your roots, right? Where you're coming from. Okay, and pro tip, right? If you really want to take it to the next level, you want to keep track of your progress in a reading journal or blog. This is not required. I wouldn't require this of everyone unless they were in my class and they were doing an assignment, right? But it helps to always keep track of your progress of your reading. And you can do this in your own journal, right? So in your own private journal that no one ever sees. Or if you want to do it publicly, you can always create a blog. And if you go to like wordpress.com, you can create a free blog and just keep track of your reading online that way. And this is, actually some people have made entire businesses out of this. They read books and then they summarize them. And then they summarize it in a way that's useful to the world, and then the world will actually pay a subscription fee to read their book summaries, right? And so I know that people have done that with like Shakespeare's plays and like if you go to Spark Notes or Cliff Notes, those are basically people that have read massive amounts of materials and they've summarized it, and they've turned that into their business, into their job. So that's one way to kind of monetize your daily reading habit if you decide to go that route. But the important thing is that you're reading every single day. And I do read every single day. I would never encourage you to do anything that I don't already do excessively myself. So this is something that I would encourage anyone to do. Read a little bit every day, even if it's just a tiny bit. You'll thank yourself for it later. Okay, so here we are towards the end, and what I want to share with you guys is 3 digital hacks for active online reading. The fact is, I know that not everybody spends all their time online. I think but in the world that we live in, I would think it's safe to say most people spend a great deal of time reading online. And just because of the COVID-19 and other factors, inevitable factors in the world around us, we're being forced to read in kind of a more digital ecosystem. So if you're going that route, right? So maybe you prefer reading paper books. I like reading paper books. But if you're going the route of reading online, or you have to, there's 3 tools that I would recommend to you. And the first one is Cold Turkey. Cold Turkey, if you go to getcoldturkey.com, this is just a site that enables the removal of distractions. Right. So what I'm saying here is, as you're reading online, there's going to be a million distractions that kind of jump out of you from nowhere. And Cold Turkey is one way to kind of help to hold back that tide, so to speak. And it's a free tool. They have a free and paid version, and I only recommend trying out the free version. And it enables you to turn off distracting websites like Facebook or Instagram. It even gives you the option to temporarily turn off Wi-Fi. Let's say if you're working on a paper or you're working on an assignment that you don't need internet for, then you just press a button and put a timer on it, and for like 1 hour, you won't be able to use that specific site or that internet feature. So that's one tool. Another one is called Instapaper. All right, this is a free bookmarking feature. Right, so you can download it on your phone, Apple or Android. You can get it as a Chrome extension, but it enables you to basically save blogs and save articles and save different things that you read online, right? So have you ever been online and you wondered to yourself, how can I don't want to read this now, but I want to read it later, right? And Instapaper enables you to save it for later. And then when you go back to Instapaper later, it has kind of curated all of this content from your previous reading before. So that's something to look into. And the third one that I really recommend above the other 2 is Evernote Web Clipper. Evernote Web Clipper. And this is like Instapaper. It's a bookmarking tool, but it also has so many other features that enable you can take screenshots of websites. You can also simplify text, right? So let's say, and remove some of the ads and other distracting features of the internet. So I'm going to actually show you how the Evernote Web Clipper works really quickly. Okay. So let's say we're reading an article on medium.com, which is a great blogging medium. Okay, and there's an article that has just lots of like fluff around it. All right. And so what we're going to do is I've downloaded the Evernote Web Clipper Chrome extension, because I'm using a Chrome browser. And I think they have it on Firefox and Safari as well. And what I can do is if I click the Chrome extension, what it enables me to do is I can actually save the entire article for later. If I want to save just parts of the article or the simplified article, I click that. And see what it does when I click on the simplified article is it enables me to read the article without any of the fluff, right? Without any of the ads or links or anything. It's just almost like reading something on a book, right? On a book with white pages and black ink, right? If I want to save the full page with all the links and stuff, I can do that. I can bookmark it for later. Or if I want to take a screenshot, let's say I just want to take a screenshot of a section of text, right? I can do that, click and drag, and it saves the screenshot for me later, right? So I click Save Clip, and later when I log into my Evernote, it'll be there, all right? So those are just 3 tools that I recommend. The Cold Turkey, the Instapaper, and the Evernote Web Clipper, especially the Evernote Web Clipper. That's the one that I use almost every day. And you can just Google any of those things and you should be able to find them easily online. Okay, so this is the part where we get to interact. So if you are still there and you have a internet connected device, so use your computer or your phone and you go to joinmyquiz.com, and type in the game code, then we're going to have a short quiz. All right, and if you get the highest score on the quiz, I'll give you a virtual high five. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen and everyone can see the game code. If not, I'll read it to you. So the game code is 305073. All right, looks like we have Arefa and Rocky already in there. Anybody else wants to join? To get 1 or 2 more people to join us, then we'll go ahead and start. All right, there's Faria. So I'm going to go ahead and start it. And if you haven't typed the game code yet, don't worry. You can still join after it starts, and you can still win as long as you start before the game ends. Okay, looks like Rocky got 2nd place, and who was it that got 3rd place? All right, so whoever got 3rd place and 2nd place, all right, well, Rocky, here's your high five, and 3rd place, here's your high five. High five. Okay, very well done, guys. And even if you completed the quiz, all right, you should, you deserve some kind of reward, all right? So buy yourself a snack or something after this. Okay, so I really hope everyone was able to learn something from that. And looking at the questions, all right, looks like we all got the first one correct. What is active reading? And it's reading something with the determination to understand and evaluate its relevance to your needs. All right, the WWH questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. What is critical thinking? Using your powers of analysis and evaluation to make a decision about information presented to you. Good. This one, okay, a little bit of a trick question. If you chose Evernote Web Clipper, you were correct. But I also made it possible if you chose Instapaper, it's also kind of correct because you can clip and save web pages for later on that one as well. And then the SQ3R method of active reading is skim, question, read, recite, and review. This one, there it is. Okay, as far as those opportunities that I mentioned, right? So these webinars are just kind of a taste, really, a taste of what the academic English program is like. And so the course that I teach full-time is a 10-week bridge program. And in this program, we're obviously learning academic English, but we're also developing real-world and academic skills. So things like how to give a seminar presentation, how to write a research report, how to write in the academic style. And then, of course, I like to share my favorite digital tools to leverage your work and study skills, etc. And the next course starts June 7th. If you're interested, or if you know anyone that's interested, feel free to point them my way, or just find us on Google at Murdoch Dubai. And okay, so this last part, I'd like to open up the floor if anyone has any questions, anything that wasn't super clear, or anything that they want to follow up on. Feel free to put your question in the chat box below.
Okay, yes, thanks, John. We'll just wait for some questions to come through. I can't see any that have come through on the chat box at the moment, so hopefully that means yet again you've covered all of the important information. So yeah, big thanks to John for delivering yet another very kind of interesting, insightful, but I think most importantly a very useful session. And I'm hoping that those that are in attendance today have been able to take something away that you'll be able to apply in your kind of future studies there. Just one question that's come through here from Deepak, John. Is it possible to please share web link to gain English grammar?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so I mean, the first one that comes to mind, I have some students that are using Grammarly, right? So if you go to Grammarly, there's a Chrome extension that actually enables you to kind of like, if you know in Microsoft Word, when you type a word, the spelling is wrong, and then it just puts a highlighter. You click on the highlighter and it tells you the correct spelling. That Grammarly is the same way, but not just with the spelling, but the grammar, things like that. So they have a Chrome extension. I think they have a free version, and then there's like a paid version if you want all the features. And then the other one for English grammar that I'm always recommending to my students is the Khan Academy grammar course. Okay, and this is a great course. It's a video-based course where you basically watch 3-minute video on a specific aspect of grammar, and then you take a quiz afterwards. And let's say if you score less than 100% on the quiz, then you just take it again until you score 100%, and then you go on to the next video. But it's a very, yeah, so where can you join this course? Khan Academy grammar course. If you just Google that, so just Google Khan Academy grammar, right? It should be the first thing that pops up. But Khan Academy, it's a free online academy, right? So you can take classes there. It usually helps if you have a teacher, right? So if you want me to, for example, be your teacher on Khan Academy, you can send me an email and I can add you to one of my Khan Academy courses. But or you can just sign up yourself and kind of be self-motivated if you're a self-motivator. So I went and put it in the chat box, so you can just Google that. Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks for that, John, and thanks for the questions that have come in there. Very useful, I'm sure, for the other attendees as well. As always, if you're familiar with the webinar format, I'm just going to wrap up now with a bit of further information about Murdoch University Dubai. As John said, today's session is very much a taster of kind of what you can expect in terms of the education and the type of experience you will receive with us at Murdoch University. So, I mean, just to give you a bit of background of kind of where we're at the moment, I'm sure many of you are experiencing the current COVID-19 world that we're living in very sort of different ways, depending on where you're joining us from. Just to kind of give a bit of background that currently here in the UAE, we are noticing that the lockdown measures are starting to ease slightly. We will see how that situation unfolds over the next couple of weeks after Ramadan. But generally the message for you guys as students is that, you know, this doesn't mean that you have to wait to kind of kickstart your future. So if you are approaching the end of your high school studies at the moment, be rest assured that we as a university will be continuing with our education, whether that's online as we are currently delivering our teaching, or indeed face-to-face in person. We'll have to kind of wait and see what the guidance is that we receive from the government. But our next intake will be taking place in September for our academic program. So if anyone is interested, please do reach out to us and we'll be very happy to provide further information about what particular courses we can offer. But the website link that we've provided on our screen there, that is a useful microsite that you can refer back to get kind of up-to-date, on-the-ground kind of information of exactly what is happening here in Dubai regarding the teaching kind of format. As John mentioned, we are also running an English program that will be commencing on the 7th of June. So if you are looking towards your higher education studies but are concerned about your level of English right now, this is a fantastic course that you could take prior to starting, you know, your academic degree. This is a 10-week program that will get you up to the required level that you need to progress into your chosen program. So you come and study with us for 10 weeks, and a special offer that we're offering to students right now is a 50% discount on the tuition fees for this particular program. So if you are interested in starting in June, again, please reach out to us and we can give you some further details about this particular course. And in terms of academic programs, you can see on the list on your screen there the variety of subject areas that we are currently offering. I know that we are looking to expand this portfolio as well, and as the months progress, it's likely that this list will be expanded. So you can always refer to our website for, again, most up-to-date information, or please, you know, reach out to myself. I'll provide my contact details in just a moment, and I'll be happy to give further details and kind of information about the content of each of these programs individually. And the final announcement that we've been providing for students, and we're very excited about here at the university, is that we have just moved to a brand new campus in Dubai. This will be open hopefully in September, so you as students can experience and benefit from a very state-of-the-art and modern university campus, which has some fantastic learning spaces and very collaborative for you as students to come and experience and work in groups or individually. And I was lucky enough to check out the new campus just earlier on this week, and it's looking fantastic. It's pretty much ready to go. So as soon as we are given the go-ahead from the government that it's safe for students to return to campus, we'll be hopefully able to open our doors to you as students. The final thing really for me to say is that we do have another session planned next Thursday. So today we've been looking at kind of academic reading. Next week we'll be focusing more on the academic writing side of things. So again, I'll be sending out a registration link following the webinar today for you to sign up to this particular session. So great to see you again next week with myself and John. But otherwise, I think that's about it. Again, our contact information on the screen there, so please reach out to us if you have any questions. I'm just going to check the chat box one final time. Great. Yeah, I can see that we've just got a few thanks there, John. So yeah, it's now just a case of us thanking you again for coming, and please keep safe and well. And we look forward to you joining us on the next session next week.